Good evening, my friend. Today, let me start with greeting you and wishing you the best always. I'm absolutely humbled to be with you today in this session, in which I'm gonna speak about the language and how we feel the language, and to what extent do we need to learn the language in different contexts. By this, I'm bearing in mind that English is absolutely one of the most popular languages all over the world. We all know that. It's not popular just because it is a language which is spoken by those who are educated or those who have the chance to go to schooling which is distinguished. The fact this language is important because it's the language of science, the language of knowledge. For these reasons, I think that English is becoming one of the most popular languages in the world. Save that it's also popular because we grow up to see that English speakers always are known to be the most refined and educated in the society. So everyone wants to speak this language because it makes you sort of unique, a unique person because you speak English. Once again, I may say that English is spreading all over the world because it was the language of one of the biggest empires all over the world. All of us knows that Great Britain is one of the gigantic countries which has colonies all over the world. My country, Sudan, is one of the countries which colonized by the British. And of course, it is well known that we gained independence back in 1956. Understanding the language today is a challenge, and it is a big challenge to understand the language. This is supported by many evidences, which I will make it clear during my speech. Nowadays, in our world today, we know that we have different accents. the British accent, the American accent, the Australian accent, the Canadian accent, the African accent, even the African accent, and the Indian accent. So, you know that when you are using this language to communicate with others, you are supposed to deal with different categories of people: Africans, Canadians, Americans, Australians, British. So that at this point, we could say that you have to establish a common ground to make you able to communicate with these different categories and to understand at least the minimum requirements of the language in order to study and in order to communicate with others. At this point, I recall a very important discussion and ongoing discussions between myself and my colleague and my brother, Dr. Abbas Muhammad Taha, one of the most talented minds I have ever seen in my entire life. And I am not praising him for nothing. I believe in that. Actually, we used to discuss the language and how you may be able to cope with different situations when you are trying to learn English. And I recall back that we discussed the different categories of the language. We discussed, for example, the slang language, the colloquial language, the coarse language or the language of the street, and the formal language. These categories of the language, every learner of English should know how to deal with this, and you need it. No matter what, you need to learn the colloquial language, and you need to learn the slang language, and you need to learn the formal language. Because in real life, we don't stick to the formal language. In real life, we stick with the spoken language. So we need to understand the colloquial language. This is the real language we use in our life. In my view, from my point of view, I suggest that learning the colloquial language is one of the most important things which you have to bear in mind when you are studying English. That because no one is gonna be cool, no one is gonna be comfortable with you if you are speaking like a book. No one. Just when you speak like a book, a native speaker, for example, will look at you and just astonished. You are using a formal language when you are having a cup of coffee with him. This is unbelievable. You have to learn that the colloquial language is the only way to communicate naturally with others. The colloquial language, of course, is not sort of language which conveys that you are impolite. No. It's a polite language. It's a refined language. We use it without caring much about the grammar patterns or the grammatical patterns. Let me say, when you speak colloquially, there is no strings attached. You speak the language without restrictions. You are not caring about the grammar as you are writing an essay, for example. Just you speak, let the speak flow out of your mouth without thinking a lot about how you synthesized that sentence. And of course, the others will understand you. Depending on my experience, for example, my father, my dad, speaks Arabic, but he never been in school, but he speaks Arabic colloquially. He knows how to speak, and so do my mom. So, speaking the colloquial language is not connected with your education at all. This is a very important point to know. This challenge in learning English is one of the most severe challenges, and you will suffer much when you are trying to jump in and make yourself comfortable with language as a colloquial pattern. You have to know how the natives use the prepositions, how they use the words in the context. You have to figure out the meanings which content in these words when used colloquially. This is very important. Not only the colloquial language is important, even the slang language is important. For example, I'm not using the slang language because to me, maybe it is vulgar language, and I'm a university professor. I'm supposed to be using polite language. My commitment as a professor is to be always refined and reflect an image of my co-workers and colleagues, which is going to be acceptable image, let's say. But in a way, I have to learn, I have to know the slang language because I'm living in a community. This community is not only exclusive to professors or engineers or physicians. This community is for us all. Mechanic, plumbers, and all walks of life are jumping in one mug. So it's natural to be aware of the slang language, of the street language, in order to deal with different situations. Right now, I think that I made it clear that we need to understand the colloquial language and as well the slang language, because it's a language should be at least understood. Further, more, you have to understand the language of the teenagers, especially if you are a father. You have kids, you are raising them, you are watching out their attitudes. So you have to learn their language. And we always emphasize that dads and moms should be friends to their teenagers, sons and daughters. If you want to be a friend of your son or daughter, you have to understand his language, to watch out what he's doing. When you share with him the same language, he will feel that you are his friend. That's cool, as they say in the teenagers language, cool. Just for me, I'm not using cool always, but nowadays one of the most popular words in English, cool. You never watch TV show, a film, or colloquial dialogue, you will find this word is jumping in between 5 to 10 times. Cool, 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 cool. Like this. You have to know the meaning of these words. How teenagers use these words. For instance, my daughter used to say whatever, cool. And I'm not getting the point. What do you mean by whatever, cool? When I Googled whatever and cool, of course I know the meaning of whatever and cool, but I know it in my subconscious mind at the old days. Cool and whatever. Nowadays, cool and whatever are used in a different sense, particularly for teenagers. We have to understand this. Undoubtedly, you should not take my word for granted. Of course, may you have a different point of view, and I'm not forcing my opinions, but I'm expressing what I feel. Learning the language is a challenge when you think of the educational language, the schooling language. As a university professor, I should use a language. For example, in my essay, when I'm writing essay, I should use a language which reflects that I am competent in my field. And it is not at all accepted to use slang or colloquial language when you are writing essay or when you are delivering a lecture with your students. You have to stick to the formal language. They have to learn from you how to use the right phrases in the right place in the right time. Here, at this point, I could say it should be clear that using the formal language is very important in public speech. In formal situations, if I'm representing my country in front of UN Assembly, for example, I should use a formal language. If I'm delivering a lecture, I should use a formal language. If I'm delivering speech, motivation, I should use a formal language. Nonetheless, if I'm delivering a lecture in front of primary school students, I should not stick with the formal language 100%. I should use words which is going to be understandable to those kids. They will not understand you if you are using complicated vocabulary, complicated words. Let's suppose that I'm delivering a lecture about bullying in the school. Bullying. You know that bullying is abusing students by each other, to abuse your classmate by calling him names, for example, or discriminating against him, or just maybe physical abuse, or it may be another sort of abuse. Bullying is not allowed at schools. It is unlawful, and we should teach our sons and daughters that bullying is not cool. It's not a good thing. You should avoid it. You should never abuse others. Being abusive is a big mistake, and it is unlawful, and you may be grounded if you use this technique with others. Suppose that I'm teaching those students to avoid bullying or abusing each others in the class. How can I deliver my view? How can I deal with them? Of course, I cannot use the language which I am using in front of my university students or in front of adults. It's not acceptable at all. So you have to soften your language. You have to soften it. Make it simplified. Make it simplified in order to let them know what you are saying. And maybe you will use animations, for example, films, sketches, to show them that bullying is not a good thing and we have to avoid it. If I want to teach my son a lesson and tell him that you should not judge someone by his appearance, I cannot say to him, don't judge a book by its cover. Yes, don't judge a book by its cover. This is a very popular expression used in English. You and me can understand this expression, don't judge a book by its cover. But my son, when he is 10 years old or when he is 15 years old, maybe he is not prepared to understand this phrase. So you have to soften it. You have to use the pattern of words which makes it easier to him to understand what you are saying. So if you said to him, don't judge other people by their appearance, that means he will understand what you are saying. What is the point here? The point here is that using the language is an art, and we have to know when and with whom we are talking. This is very decisive to sort or to select the language we are going to use. I think now I made it clear enough that the categories of the language in different stages, slang language, colloquial language, and formal language, we need them all. We cannot say that we need the colloquial, but we don't need the slang language or the formal language. Every pattern, every category of these techniques will serve in a specific stage. So we have to be careful when we select the words and how we use them. Right now, if you watch American movie, yes, movies, movies. Back in my time when I'm a teenager, we used to say films, we used to say cinema. Right now, my son uses movies for films and uses movies for cinema. English is prospering and changing language. It is life language. It's life language. And here, may I quote that English words are living creatures. Living creatures. These living creatures may change over time. And you go back to the 15th century, you may see that some words were used in specific meanings, nowadays they are used differently in different meanings. So I conclude that understanding English is very challenging and is very tough if you are not prepared to do that and understand it. I think today I will conclude with this, but in my next video, I'm gonna discuss with you another important topic, and it's also connected with the language. My friend, it's my pleasure to be with you, and I wish that you will enjoy this video, and I'm sure you will feed me back. And till that time, wish you the best. Goodbye. Thank you.